How are local governments using remote and hybrid working arrangements? How will local government operations and management change in the post-pandemic environment? And what key questions do government executives need to ask to meet the demands of a post-pandemic time? I will explore these questions and so much more with Sherri Greenberg, contributor to the IBM Center Report, COVID-19 and its Impact, 7 essays on reframing government management and operations. So, Sherri, during the COVID-19 pandemic, local government workplace issues surfaced that present many serious questions for how local governments will work and operate. Your piece for the IBM Center, The Future of Work in Local Governments Beyond COVID-19, kind of raises those questions. I'd like for you to sort of tell us what areas specifically these questions encompass.
Absolutely. I think of this in two ways, both how the future of work has been affected by COVID-19 and local government, internal, inside to local government. What does this mean? Regarding how local government itself functions, and then external. What does this mean both to residents, and what does this mean to those outside of local government that interface with local government? So if we look at inside local government, those internal issues, we would ask questions such as, I call them the W's, right? The old who, what, when, where, why, and how. Right. We need to apply this to local government in a systems-wide approach regarding the future of work and what we have learned beyond and past COVID-19. What services do we need to deliver, and how do we need to deliver them? How will we hire people? How will we train people? How will we evaluate people? What will our offices look like inside of local government? How much space will we need? How will it be configured? Will we have hybrid work environments? What will this mean for people who continue to work out in the field? So those are some of the internal issues, as I call them, that we would see that are internal to the management workings and governments of local government. And when I say local government, I mean everything from a city to a county to a school district to a water district, a hospital district. There are all kinds of local governments when we think about that. And when I talk about those external issues, there are just so many external issues to local government when we talk about the future of work. And these can include rethinking and redesigning urban spaces. What does the public square look like? What does this mean for zoning, for parks, for transportation, parking? Will we not need as much parking? Will people be working remotely, some hybrid? What will the patterns be as far as commuting? Social distancing, will that continue? And what will this mean for our public spaces? Those are just a few of the issues that I see both internal to the workings and governance of local governments, and then those that are external.
So, Sherri, what will remote and hybrid working arrangements mean for planning within the local government workplace and planning within cities themselves?
This is one of the huge questions today that we are trying to grapple with, because we are just now emerging in some places, or beginning to emerge, I should say, from COVID-19 and from the total lockdown that some people have had. Now, let's not forget that there are people who have continued to work outside of their homes, either by choice or out of necessity. They are working in environments where they must work outside the home, whether they are stocking grocery shelves, so important to us, and to having food, whether they're, as we saw here in Texas with the power outages, working on those electric lines, whether they are providing healthcare. So there are people who have continued to work either by choice or by necessity outside the home. But there are many other people who have been working from a home environment, or at least partially hybrid, as we say. And as we see cities opening up, both opening up to having workers come back in, and then within the city, the environment beginning to open up some with more vaccinations, we are beginning to grapple with this issue of Where will people work and what will the space look like? I don't think that we're actually going back completely to how things were before COVID-19. I think that what we will see is some people who were not working outside of the home will go back to working completely outside of the home, given the nature of their occupations or what their employers are requiring. I think that there could be some people who will continue to work 100% remotely or virtually. They may not even be living in the same city anymore as their employer. They may have moved. And then I think that there are many people who may be entering this kind of hybrid work environment. There are some employers who have found that it will be more economical. They don't need as much expensive space, right? And what will that mean for space planning? What will that mean for our commercial spaces and our downtowns and our other centers of commerce? And there will be people and places that decide, maybe we need people in 2 days a week, and maybe we'll have them in shifts, or maybe there'll be a couple days a week where everyone is here, but we will continue with some type of hybrid environment, both for space planning, but also for the benefit of our employees who may have decided that some of the virtual work environment is helpful to them. There are some employers in some situations where they've actually seen productivity increase, right, with the virtual environment. They're not having commuting. They're not, they may be caring for people and it's more efficient. On the other hand, there are others who need to get out of that homework environment. It's not as efficient for them. They don't have the offices. They do have disruptions at home. And then others where they want to continue with this hybrid type of environment.
So, Sherri, how has the pandemic accelerated changes that were already underway in many local governments?
The pandemic clearly has accelerated changes. And some of those were already underway in local government, or local governments were thinking about them. And this has been pervasive across local governments, whether they are cities or counties or school districts or healthcare districts. One of the big ones, and I really feel that this is important, and I know that we have members of Congress who are trying to address this, as well as members of state legislatures, including here in Texas, and that is universal broadband. This is something that for maybe some people was on the back burner, for others had been on the front burner for a while, but became very obvious, to local governments. And that is, all of a sudden, we're needing to shift in local government and provide services that maybe were partially online or a little bit virtual to, going from almost 0 to 70% or 100%, right? Telemedicine would be one, but it's not just telemedicine or telehealth, all kinds of appointments, all kinds of interactions that are now virtual. Well, for that to work, you have to have broadband, you have to have high-speed internet. And we saw cities pitching in with school districts, for instance, to figure out, and with our public transportation providers, how can we get buses with broadband, with Wi-Fi hotspots, so students can do their homework, or so that people can get on and make appointments for their COVID-19 vaccination appointments. And we saw in some areas, such as telehealth and telemedicine, where you had a very low uptake in those type of appointments, go from maybe 10% to 70% overnight, with a very high satisfaction rate. Because for many people, getting to these appointments was extremely difficult, particularly if they are in underserved and under-resourced areas. They may not have had transportation or childcare, or they may be in occupations where it's not easy to get to those appointments.
Sherri, how has the pandemic disrupted and displaced many long accepted practices in local government management operations?
There have been many changes in local government operations. First and foremost, let's start with meetings in local government. And this, of course, is supported in statute with open meetings. From the standpoint of accountability and transparency, you want to have meetings that are open and accessible to people. And traditionally, that had meant that all of these meetings were in many places, 100% in person. Whether it was a city council meeting or county commissioners, your school district, your healthcare district, your transportation board, those were 100% in person. And you quickly saw a pivot because of COVID-19 and the transmission to 100% virtual meetings, right? Where people were using Zoom or whatever platform for public participation, for all of the meetings, for all of the hearings. And there are questions now, once restrictions are lifted, I think you will see these meetings going back to in person, but the question is, will there still be an option for people to participate virtually? Because we talk about the frequent flyers, the people who always came to your city council meeting, let's say, because they wanted to, because they had the time to, because they liked being there in person. But there were other folks who could not do that. So will we still have these virtual participation options? I hope that we will. I call it make new friends, but keep the old. We'll go back to our in-person meetings, but still have these options for people who are not comfortable or cannot participate in person, but want to participate.
So, Sherri, we talked about the change in how government employees work, but I want to talk about the shift in how public services are being delivered. Perhaps you can elaborate on some of those changes.
We have seen changes in service delivery, as I spoke of, for instance, with telehealth and telemedicine. But we've seen other changes, too, that I think really did need to accelerate. There's been talk for years about cities and other local governments and even state governments providing better service online, having service that actually worked as far as being able to get online and seamlessly do everything from your driver's license renewal to permitting. And that is something else that we saw rapidly increase and improve, was having the availability to services online that actually worked, right? With also being able to call in to call centers and get help. And all of these are features that people actually have been demanding from local governments for a long time, because I've been able to see them and use them from industry, right? Well, if I can buy something this way and do it online seamlessly, or get a health appointment and talk to somebody, why can't I do this with my local government? And so that is something else that we have seen. Now, it also, again, underscores the need for universal broadband. I personally think that broadband should be a utility, just like electric service, water service, wastewater service. In 1936, Congress, the United States Congress, passed the Rural Electrification Act. And I think that we need something similar to that for broadband now, because for this to succeed, everybody has to have that high-speed internet.
So likewise, COVID-19 accelerated the adoption and implementation of new technologies in local governments beyond broadband. Would you elaborate on some of these new technologies and, more importantly, the implication of their adoption and use?
There are clearly other technologies. They are all underpinned by really having this high-speed internet, and not just having it accessible, being able to afford it. So, of course, what we're doing now, right? We are recording this audio via Zoom. The presence of more and more platforms for virtual recordings and webinars, whether it's Zoom, Cisco WebEx. I mean, there's dozens now. I'm getting new ones every day, it seems like, to hop on, right? There are also new apps that we are seeing as far as providing services, and really getting away from app-driven service provision, but just going fully to virtual service provision instead of having to go to an app. So that is something else that we are seeing, designing everything as digital first without the app intervention.
So, Sherri, local governments can't do this alone. How important are partnerships and collaboration to this effort?
Local governments don't have to go this alone. And I think that this is a big opportunity to see our local governments working together across metropolitan areas with our cities, our counties, our suburbs, even our exurban areas and our rural areas, working together to form commissions with stakeholders and with the community and with folks from the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit, and the academic sectors all working together. And we have been seeing this more and more with the COVID-19 pandemic, with these emergency operations centers that are bringing together people from different industries, bringing together the different local governments with their hospitals. The Port of Los Angeles has a Blue Ribbon Commission on the Future of Work. And I think that we need to continue, if we're doing this or if not, start convening these committees or commissions or task forces that work across areas to really tackle these future of work challenges and these workforce training and education issues. Examples include from the state of Washington, the state of Washington Workforce Training and Education Coordinating Board, for instance. And then in metropolitan areas, we know that we have access to councils of government, COGS as we call them, to collaborate, and other entities such as the U.S. Conference of Mayors or the ICMA. These are very important opportunities for us to work together.
This has been a special edition of the Business of Government Hour, a series on how the pandemic has transformed government management and operations with Sherri Greenberg, contributor to the IBM Center Special Report, COVID-19 and its Impact, 7 essays on reframing government management and operations. Subscribe, download, and listen to the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, or on your favorite podcast app. And as always at businessofgovernment.org.